The video game platform has its share of franchises that have come and gone. Some that have stood the test of time, and others that never really left their first title despite hope and set up for a series to blossom. While some developers chase trends and try to strike into hot market items to get their own share of the pie, some reach out so far into the lineups of obscurity that it's hard to find that perfect audience for their game to land enough of a success to keep their business afloat. But when video games find their right medium between the two, their chances of success are that much higher that it can blossom into a franchise that people crave more and more of. Hello, and welcome to Between the Cushions, a deep dive into the games that we have finished here on the ArchiveCouch with either the Classic Hour gameplay or with our many other couchmates. I am your host for today's segment, Blue Pyro, and we are here to highlight the game, Gears of War. Gears of War, a beloved franchise finding its roots in the Xbox 360 days, was released on November 7th, 2006. This was roughly 1 year after the console's launch, and sold 1 million copies in its first 2 weeks. This made it the fastest Xbox 360 game to date. After only 10 weeks from its debut, on January 19, 2007, it had already passed 3 million copies sold. Having a holiday window release, on top of being part of the fresh blood in the 7th generation console's lifecycle, I am sure added to the surge in its sales. This had landed on the 14th of the best-selling games list for the Xbox 360, right above its sequel title. That's not to say the game itself didn't have its own merits. Being a third-person shooter using cover-based tactics to fight off enemy forces in the prime days of the heavy action gun game days, Gears of War checked off all the right boxes and more to compel their fans. Dark atmosphere, apocalyptic story and setting, hero action-based gameplay, gritty and rough characters, and in my opinion, an over-the-top carnage-filled starting weapon that rivaled that of Mortal Kombat for its fatality, brutal scenes. The weapons for this franchise were as unique as their enemies. While some were by the book, normal expected, such as the shotgun, a magnum, and a burst assault rifle, others were far more unique, none more than the Lancer. This assault rifle weapon was equipped with a bayonet of a chainsaw. The utility of this weapon allowed for the players to cut through their opposition. Pun very much intended. This over-the-top, core-filled weapon I am certain is what helped push the franchise into its massive hit status, as it had no shame in how bloody of a weapon it was, despite any practicality it actually would have on the battlefield. When it comes to the release window for this title, it is surprising in review how perfect of a window this game had looking back. Looking at the critically acclaimed titles alone, Gears of War on the 360 side didn't hold much competition, with the exceptions of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas, which was released a few weeks after. But in the other markets, such as Nintendo, releasing its Nintendo Wii only 2 weeks after, and a flag title of Zelda Twilight Princess on it, not to mention the GameCube port releasing a month after, Gears certainly held strong. On Sony's end, their third iteration system was also releasing this month of November 2006, and its PS2 system was getting the initial release of Guitar Hero 2. All around worthy titles upon release, but the commending note I want to highlight here is despite what we know now of how Nintendo Wii failed on the third-party market, and also failed at what was called the hardcore gaming audience, Sony was also coming off the heels of its glory days from the PS2, with the overpriced system of the PS3 starting at $499 minimum. At inflation, this puts the system around $780 at the time of writing for this price point, which is actually higher than the PS5 Pro, which is released on November 7th, 2024 at $699. All these numbers said, Gears of War pulled in its fans that could have sat on their money for highly anticipated new systems and even the extra holiday spending for others towards its competition. This game stood strong and brought in a haul of over 3 million fans. That is quite an impressive feat to say at the least. The narrative of Gears is not a generic by-the-book story either. Gears of War takes place on an alternative Earth known as Serra.
For a time, the humans of Serra knew the illusion of peace, until Emergence Day. In time, their valiant defense was crushed. With billions dead, humans denied their enemy control by destroying their own civilization. Now, the long struggle against overwhelming odds approaches a final, desperate step.
It has been 14 years since the Emergence Day, when the underground dwellers, known as the Locusts, began their war on the surface dwellers, known as humans. The game follows our lead protagonist, Marcus Phoenix, a convicted felon, off a mysterious action that we as the player are limited in learning about. His friend, Dom Santiago, busts him out of prison, telling our hero that the prisoners have been pardoned as this area is under attack. The Locusts have attacked and they need to get out immediately. From there, the gameplay begins and the player is immersed in the war-filled lands of Gears. As the story progresses, we are teased into a bit of Marcus's backstory, that he is deemed a traitor of the COG faction. But with the oncoming threat of the Locusts and larger monsters, they need all hands that they can get. The COG team has a light mass bomb ready to use, but they need to get a map of the underground tunnels to make sure they hit the Locust Fiends where they live and put an end to this ongoing war. The mission is set and the team is ready to head out. There are more twists and turns that occur, and as any good story would provide, and like any war story, nothing goes as planned. The squad must take on every challenge before them to complete their mission, but I won't be covering all of that here. Gears 1 does very well in setting its lore to the world it's created, where it slowly gives its fans a taste, but leaves them with enough loose threads to want to know more. For being a new property, the game isn't without its flaws. Not saying that the sequel's always better than the previous iterations, but like any series, they need to lay down groundwork for later titles to grow upon. And this series isn't short of its unique traits that made it stand out from the rest. From my research, Gears of War was the first to introduce the action reload system. If it wasn't the first, it was certainly the one that put it on the forefront of the gun game genre. This system is where the player could not only reload their weapons on command, but they could reload at a much faster rate than the standard reload timer would allow. Not only that, but the player would be rewarded for the QuickTime event of this reload system with a stronger damage output for the bullets that were added to the chamber. This could easily be done while hiding behind cover from the enemies. Gears of War also provided an interactive story of branching paths that, although did not bring new story elements, it did bring replay value and different mission approach experience. When the player would be presented a branching path, the game would propose a scenario of the mission and ask a prompt with the trigger buttons as to which path the player would like to take. In a split-screen couch co-op environment, this would also allow at times for the two players to take on the different sections separately. Though it is not that in-depth of a mechanic, it was a great addition to help the immersion of the story. On the note of co-op story mode, whether it be split-screen or online, the two players would take control of Marcus or Dom throughout the majority of the story. The players were always part of a squad and not just a doppelganger of the lead character. Being part of the squad as well meant you must work together and survive together as a team, providing suppressing fire, calling out ammo and supplies, or reviving teammates that would have fallen in the front lines. Or, as we like to refer to it on the couch, tussle the hair and tell them who's a good boy. Gears of War has gone from its 2006 release to become one of the staple franchises of the Microsoft gaming landscape. As of the time of this recording, there has been 5 games in the mainline series and spin-off games of a prequel and even a tactics-based game. A movie series has been in and out of production, and a 6th game called E-Day has been announced with no official release date set in place. Per reviews from what I am seeing as of December 2019, Gears of War started at 94 and has not been able to reach above that number since. Though the immediate sequel is showing only 1 point lower, the other titles seem to have missed the mark when it comes to recapturing the first day's glory. However, that isn't all I want to say about this game. There are a bit of extra change from between the cushions I would like to add in to this piece as well. Gears of War has never really been a franchise I've cared much throughout my gaming career. While I have loved first and third person shooters over the years, never my immediate go-tos mind you, the Gears franchise though just never appealed to me. I will give the series its fair share of chances in my opinion over the few releases I actually have tried, but I would have the same problems over and over again that I couldn't look past to enjoy my gameplay. For starters, I'm not one for over-the-top violence. I do love my action fantasy, my fighting games, my RPGs, but when the frontrunner for this game was a chainsaw bayonet, already I was unimpressed. Much like slasher movies, when the big appeal is just how much blood and violence we can show is the hot ticket item, I'm typically one to look the other way. Another problem I've had with this series is the overly dark atmosphere. Now I don't mean that by the story, I mean that by the visuals. I understand it's a war setting, and I understand that low saturation is what works best for a game in this environment. But when I can't tell a friend from a foe, from a parked car, or a piece of debris, I'm already annoyed. I don't want to gripe or harp on the overabundance of chest-high walls, extreme corners, and sections that you can take cover behind. It's both part of the core of the game, and there are so many other reviewers that have already done that griping before me. But the main problem I had with this mechanic was the almost flypaper aspect that the COG team suffered through, and they could not get off these walls or would just hug them ever so tightly that it would just become an annoyance. I'm not wanting to do the lone wolf tactics aspect that people do in Halo or Call of Duty. I respect the idea of take cover, fire when you have the opportunity, but dear Lord, when there was so many walls you can hide behind, you never feel like the value of cover is actually valued. I will, though, give the game a few praises, as I do love the action reload system. It's a great implementation of quick-time events that not only fit well into this game, but aren't forced to use. If you can do it, its benefits are amazing, and if you fail your attempt, you are punished. But more importantly, you can choose not to do it. As well, the limit of the buff being the ammo that was added into the chamber was such a perfect touch, as it incentivized the player to use most of the clip instead of reload happy most players are doing with the other franchises. Another merit I will give this game is its enemies, specifically one in particular. That was both a story-based menace as it was a final boss arsenal, the Krill. These bat-like creatures thrived in the dark to the point that if you were not taking cover in the light, these creatures would swarm their target and devour them in almost an instant. Now unfortunately in our playthrough, we needed to turn up the game's brightness at its highest for our early days of recording so our audience could see. But the idea of a reverse take cover where the enemy can't see you, and you had to stand in the bright light, still behind cover, was a good touch. The final boss adding in the Krill to his arsenal was also a nice touch, because it forced the player to keep moving as opposed to hide behind the corner and fire. It added for the moment of emergency. As well, these creatures wouldn't care if you were Locust or human, so the player could shoot out the lights of the Locust and could watch the Krill take them out with ease. As well, I do want to call out the grenade system in this game. I had already mentioned earlier the weapon variety being a mix of new and simple, but the grenades as an idea here are great to an extent. The weapon itself isn't really that new, but the fact that they basically put it on a sling for cover distance on a throw is a great idea. However, when the COG Beefy Boys can still only hurl a sling 2 feet, I have to wonder what's the point. I'm not looking to Hail Mary on these throws, but these things, especially with a sling, should be able to go a lot farther than they do.
Whoa, calm down, grenade snob. Just because you can't pull your grenade bullshit doesn't mean that they aren't good. Gears did the same thing that Halo did and found a way to reinvent the grenade and try something different. You can either take your time, aim, and use provided trajectory, or do a quick throw around a corner, or literally just punch somebody with it so it sticks to them and run away. It was also one of the 2 games that I bought for my 360 when it first came out, alongside another favorite of mine called Chrome Hounds. The campaign for Gears was decent, but most of my time was spent playing multiplayer. It was a pretty vile and toxic community, and everyone had their own idea of what cheat playing was, and everyone had their own technique of shaming you if they were able to beat you. Unlike other games, you're dead during the shaming. In this game, you're just hoping for death. My playstyle was always more like a CQB, so I especially made use of tagging people for grenades and running away, or using the chainsaw, much to the dismay of our mutual friend Carnage, who did not appreciate my playstyle at all. I also my best to use one of the most important skill sets that would involve punching someone, then turning them into spaghetti with a shotgun. Overall, I also found much success with blind firing with the shotgun, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense in a gun game, but yeah, you just run full sprint at somebody and then pull the trigger at just the right moment and hope for the best. As I've gotten older though, I've been way more appreciative of the later installments of Gears as they slowly introduce game modes such as Horde or Escape, as that's more of the co-op thing I'm into now. But I guess my final thoughts is that I appreciated Gears 1 because it provided a gaming experience that was very unique and has been copied constantly for years after.
Gears of War did receive a re-release in 2015 as Gears of War Ultimate Edition. The goal for this title was to preserve the original experience of the original title while updating it visually to modern consoles. Surprisingly though, it only received an 82 out of 100. The originals, however, are accessible in a backwards compatibility on the Xbox One and the Xbox Series consoles. The same can be said with each of the following up titles. Despite the number of critics give games, each player's experience and enjoyments are their own. So while one may love the gameplay, others may find more flaws and pull them away. Though for me, this series doesn't hold much value in its enjoyment department, I cannot ignore how big of a fanbase it actually has, and how there are some great items within, even if it doesn't come all together for me as a whole. I want to thank you all for watching. ArchiveCouch is primarily a Let's Play channel, as we play through older games spanning from the NES all the way up to the PS4. So please come join me and my friends on the couch as we post new videos rotating weekdays scheduling at noon. If you would like to see us in our early days of the channel, you can watch our playthrough of this game right here. We have certainly grown from those days, but if you want to see how we all started, please enjoy the early days of our footage. Between the Cushions, we'll be covering games that we have completed previously on this channel. If there is a game that we have finished you would like a retrospective on, please leave a comment down below on what game you would like us to cover next. Or keep an eye out for our recent community poll that lets our couch potatoes speak on what they would like to see next. That being said, please note it does take a lot of editing and process for these videos, but when we can complete them, they'll be uploaded on Sundays in this time slot. Hope to catch you on the next one. See ya!